thing is off-market. Off-market doesn't also necessarily mean a deal. I've seen off-market deals that sold for more than they should have. You just have to look at and determine how knowledgeable are your buyer and your seller, because if your seller sold it to you for a deal, well, he probably would have given the same deal that, how motivated was he? I want to get done with it, be done, as opposed to, I know the last 2 years again, just like throw the last 2 years out of your mind because it's just so not normal.
And then we will go into kind of an interview with Carrie Williams. I heard her speak, it's probably a year ago at a Des Moines Area Realtor Association, talking about the appraisal process, and she did a really good job of dumbing it down for us realtors. Let's put it that way. So I knew she could come speak with us as investors also and put on, just educate us so that we better understand the appraisal process. For the market update, I've debated on how and what a market update looks like for this group because it's much different than what a market update looks like for realtors. Realtors care about maybe the velocity, how much inventories come on the market, different price points. And I've thought about it in this group. I would say this group probably cares just a little bit more about your flip, single family homes under 300,000, and then what is happening in the multifamily world. So investment type properties. I struggle with this. There isn't really good data around just that specific stuff. I'm going to today, instead of give just a general market update, I'm going to give you some feedback that I've had from my buyers and sellers in the last 3 weeks, and also what I've heard from other agents and their feedback from buyers about what is happening in the market, what buyers are saying, and what sellers are saying. So one of the predominant things is the buyers they don't care about interest rate anymore. So if you're selling a house or if you're buying, the argument of, well, rates went up, so I want a lower price is rarely valid now. Now, you might say, hey, seller, you priced it where interest rates are at 3%, so we can only offer this. And I applaud you for that, and you should try to use that sales tactic. It's just sometimes sellers don't have that motivation. At the same point, just yesterday, one of my clients, and then also a realtor in the office's clients, we had listings, and they'd sat on the market for a couple months, and we each received 3 offers on different properties, but each 3 different buyer offers on one day. Out of the blue, no rhyme or reason. My intent in saying that is, if you are looking at properties, just make an offer. And I can't stress out enough, quit thinking about and trying to put yourself in the seller's shoes. Put an offer in at the price that you think is right. And if that is not fair for the seller, they will say no. They will not yell at you and curse you out in most cases. Make an offer. And then follow up another week after that, and another week after that. And then sellers, if you're selling a property right now, my suggestion for you would be to be patient. Buyers are out there. There's a tick about your property, there's something wrong with it, or something that you don't know, or maybe you know and you're just not willing to change on it. The spring market, everyone I've talked to, every realtor says we have buyers that are ready, we have listings that are coming up this spring. We don't anticipate a slow spring market at all. After saying that, you realtors that are in the room, does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that?
So the Iowa market is extremely dependent in the winter on weather and Christmas. So that's why things have slowed down tremendously. Christmas holidays are now over. And the weather has been pretty nice lately. We see dramatic shifts in what the market does in Des Moines based on weather. So the foreseeable future is good weather conditions. I would expect that to continue. I 100% agree that when interest rates started jumping up, everybody put the brakes on. What's going to happen? I don't know. People finally settled into, okay, this is now the new normal. So I would agree 100% interest rate is not as much of a factor to most buyers. You've always got those outliers, but our market is significantly dependent on weather. We get a huge cold spell and it's miserable. We get a bunch of snow. It's going to stop and slow down again. But that's also normal here.
It's interesting you say that because that's literally what happened when we had the negative degree weather. It's super cold. Yeah. Christmas. It kind of happened simultaneously. That was market update. We'll go into just the appraisal and pick Carrie's brain about appraisal process. So first, I'll hand this over to Carrie and just have her give us her background and why, in 30 seconds, why should we listen to you?
I think everyone has a question for an appraiser. Always get asked a ton of questions when people find out what I do. I've been doing this for 16 years, so are you going to read that?
Yeah,
that's just your question.
This is my question.
I'm
not going to read your bio.
Okay. Well, so in a nutshell, I went to UNI. I have a degree in finance. Worked a principal right out of college. Liked my job. It felt like something just wasn't right. I jumped around to John Deere Financial, State Farm. I jumped around a lot. only to realize that it wasn't the job, it was me. I can't sit in an office all day. And I had worked with appraisers at Principal. I did commercial lending, and it just clicked one day that I had always loved real estate. I like analysis, but I also like to be outside doing things. And I just realized, hey, this is something I should look into. So I went to my job at that time at John Deere Financial and pulled up how to become an appraiser. Probably should have gotten fired. So I started pursuing it. It was either 2005 or 2006, started taking the coursework. I started full-time late 2006, got certified 2008, started my own business in 2010, and I've got 2 other certified residential appraisers that work for my company as well, both of which are actually more experienced than me. Maybe they should be here, but so anyway, that's me.
I did not know that you had kind of been through the downturn before and after, somewhat before and after during, right?
Yeah.
So that's very good perspective. So we'll get into appraisal process. So a lot of this room are investors. We still don't know how to work with appraisers. How do we best make sure that we account for what an appraiser is going to see in a property? And I know that, and you can give a 101 because I understand it changes drastically, and I'll get into that with some of these questions. But like starting out, you flip a property and you're trying to get a cash out refinance appraisal. Walk us through that process as investors from when you first see the crappy property and you renovate it, and then you're going to get the cash out refinance appraisal. How do you think like an appraiser to make sure that an investor is not blindsided?
Oh, by the way, just so you know, always the low appraisers are always the wrong ones. So I guess what we're generally looking for is overall quality and condition and how that relates to, when I say the market, I don't mean the metro market. I mean your very specific, almost micro market. Appraisers are supposed to look at properties like as a buyer. I'm supposed to walk in like I'm a buyer. What interests me, what doesn't interest me. But more so, if I'm a buyer in that market, what other comparable properties are out there that I'm going to be looking at saying, gosh, well, this one's got that and it's priced for this. This one's got that and it's priced at that. It's to truly know what your competition is. I mean, again, look at it from the perspective of a buyer. One of my appraisers has a significant number of investment properties. A few years ago, he went to sell one and he said, would you come and walk through this property? I've been too involved. I've seen it too much. I need a fresh set of eyes on it, and just to see is there anything that stands out to you that I missed. So it's overall quality, overall condition, and how that directly compares to anything else that a typical buyer is going to be looking at in that market.
So the question is an appraiser going to look at stuff that is sold in that micro market, or what is for sale, maybe pending in that micro market?
So an appraisal is actually based on sales, as I'm sure most people know. So yes, it is based on sales. However, you can do that research. It's easier for you as an investor to look to see what am I competing with that's available. You can pull up the pictures. Once they sold, they're hard to get access. I mean, realtors can pull that up and see what the photos and everything look like. The reason I say as an investor, it's probably easier to pull up your listings. I don't see much harm in doing listings as opposed to, so I'm going to use sales in my report, I have to. However, if we had a changing market that was going really fast, one way up or one way down, then looking at our listings would be a little detrimental, potentially. But when you're looking at what am I competing with, keep an eye, when you're buying and you're flipping a property, keep an eye on what's on the market. It takes some time to get these properties that you're flipping done. Keep an eye on the market the whole time you're there, and if they're vacant, go look at them to see what do they look like that I don't, just to really get a feel for where it's at. But the valuation will be based on sales, but there is also a component in there that includes listings. So we don't normally include those in the sales grid, but there's like a marketing section that how many properties are out there for sale. That just kind of speaks to the marketing conditions overall.
An actionable item for us that are flipping properties is as you're flipping the property, go look at everything that you would consider your competition that hits the market. Like I spoke to one of my clients 3 weeks ago, and he's flipping a property and it's been sitting on the market. And I said, "Have you went and looked at all the competition?" He said, "Well, I've seen the pictures online." So doesn't do justice. So absolutely go schedule a showing with your favorite realtor and go walk.
I can't see the insides of all of those properties, but when I'm in literally hundreds of properties a year, you get a feel for, sometimes you even know names of who flipped it or something as to the quality of the workmanship that got done. Or I'll even call agents and say, gosh, this one sold really high or this one sold low. And sometimes I can get that feedback as to, yeah, it was a crap job, or they found out this, or they did an exceptional job. But really pay attention to what's going on while you're doing it. And I would 100% agree, get into some of those properties if you're able to. Because pictures don't tell the whole story. I've seen horrible flip jobs that in photos look amazing. And then you walk in and it is the crappiest work you've ever seen.
So on that, how do you appraise that quality of work being poor? Like, because there's no line item for crappy work, right?
No, so it would be, it would be generally reflected in either condition or there is a quality line, but it's more of like quality of finishes, quality of construction. So either one of those lines, you can make an adjustment. Or what I've had to do at times is just say, I'm going from a lower end of a range of values just because the workmanship is, maybe subpar or not as professional as maybe you would expect it to be.
You write that in the report.
Yeah. Some of them can get rather, I won't say ugly, but my job is, I work for the lender. So my job is to protect the lender. My job is to convey to the lender what's going on with this property. So if I tend to use, nice terminology as compared to what I would like to say, something like, is completed in a, less than professional manner that are just, inferior to what the rest of the comparables would typically have. But yeah, we'll put that stuff in there.
Perfect. So that leads really well into we maybe should have started this. Walk us through the typical appraisal process. Who orders it? How does it flow? Does an investor ever talk to an appraiser? Can an investor talk to an appraiser? Both during and once it comes back, how does that process work?
Yep, so most of the time an appraiser's clients are lenders. So I get my orders directly from lenders. Some use third parties, just depends on who it is. But I get my orders from lenders. Because of showing time, I rarely talk to realtors if there are involved or, investors. So generally I go do my thing. If I have questions, I just reached out to an investor that I've done a ton of properties for last week because the list of improvements that he was making was extremely vague. Kitchen, $5,000. Flooring, $6,000. I'm like, that doesn't tell me anything, And I know that he sometimes fixes and holds and sometimes he fixes and flips. So I called him and I said, hey, what are you doing here? Are you doing this one or do you have somebody, does this include labor? Probably one of the most beneficial things, and this is a little bit off topic, I'll get back. One of the most beneficial things you can do is if you're providing, if it's a subject to appraisal, meaning your lender wants that value based on your improvements, is to provide as detailed of information as you can. I mean line items for not just floor coverings, I want carpet, vinyl plank, tile, whatever you're going to do, granite countertops, tile backsplash, the more you can break out. And then the big thing is to tell me if that includes labor. If you're doing it all yourself, great. But if you're not, then I want to know that as well. Because that estimate for, say, $5,000, if half that's labor, well, then I know that the quality might not be as good as something that costs $5,000. And, so the more detail you can provide to the lender who's going to provide it to us, the better. So we do reach out. Investors, I suppose, can reach out. I don't know if from your side, are you ever given the appraiser's name? You're sometimes, probably,
The buyer side, yes.
Okay. So you can reach out. She wants to know if people attend the appraisals, if they show up and walk. Generally no, and I'll be honest, generally we don't want people there. We prefer to get in, do our thing, and get out. It tends to screw with the process. You just don't always get as much data. If I have questions, I absolutely reach out to people. You can. There's nothing that says you can't. So he asked about refinance appraisal. So generally, most of the time, homeowners will be there on a refinance to let you in, and then we chat with you or whatever. But back to the process, we can go through all the questions you guys want in a minute. But when I complete an appraisal, then it then goes directly back to the lender. I actually can't communicate or discuss any assignment results with anyone but my client who's a lender. So if you have, as a buyer, seller, homeowner, whomever, whatever your participation is in the transaction, have a question, it technically needs to be directed through the lender. Some people bend the rules slightly, but generally, follow those through the lender. I can't even provide a copy. I've had people call me up and not be happy because their lender didn't give them a copy. They paid for the report, so it should be theirs. Well, I understand that. My legal limitations state that I can't give you a copy of that. Most of my communication is directly with the lender, but I absolutely reach out and call agents. And I have agents, and any agents or anyone, please call me. If you have a question on something, I have a ton of agents call me, investors call me, lenders call me. They see this in the market, or this is how something was approached, and they want my 2 cents. I mean, I'm happy to take my name number. You're more than welcome to call me if you've got a question on the process or how something was handled. I can't speak to somebody else's opinion and how they arrived to that necessarily, but if you got a question about the process and how to approach a situation, let me know. The other thing is when in the process you get an appraisal back and you're not happy. Again, appraisers can't speak directly to other than our client, which is the lender. But what you can do is ask for a reconsideration of value. It just essentially means, here's some additional sales I want you to consider. Here's the things, they need to be comparable. You wouldn't believe I'll get like, I'm doing a ranch and they send me a 2-story that's twice as big, that's 3 miles away. I mean, they need to be truly comparable. Same style of dwelling, same general age, recent sales. I mean, I've had people say, oh yeah, well that house just sold, and pull it up and it was 3 years ago. Well, that doesn't, they need to be truly comparable. Jared's question was essentially 3 approaches to value. You've got sales comparison, which I think probably everybody knows and understands, and you're just comparing properties to how it directly compares to sales of other properties. Cost approach is focused on what does it cost to build that property and takes into account depreciation. It gets completed in residential appraisals, mostly because it's a lender requirement. It becomes more of a factor in commercial type properties. I'm just a residential appraiser. I can do up to 4 family, up to 4 units. So that comes into play a lot more often in unique commercial type properties. And then income approach, which is something that we would use on a multifamily property, with any type of commercial or a larger income producing. But in addition to looking at how it compares sales wise, you're also comparing the number of units, how much income all of those units generate, and you're coming up with different values based on those different methods. So, different types of appraisals. I touched on that briefly. Again, residential appraiser like me, I can do up to 4 units. So your 1 unit property is probably an appraisal almost everyone has seen. When you get to 2 to 4 units, at that point, it's got a lot more of those income components. You're analyzing how much is this going to generate that because there's value to that as well. And then anything 5 or over is going to need a general appraiser, and it's going to cost you a lot more money.
Can you explain the difference? Like, what is that?
So they just have additional requirements as far as to become certified. I mean, mine are a lot, and theirs are even more on top of it. So yeah, I mean, they're going to charge a whole lot more.
What more are they going to do?
It's a lot more in depth. It's generally not going to be a form type report. It's going to be a narrative report. I personally don't do those, but yeah, you're looking at a whole different commercial process at that point. Yeah, it's going to be a book. I mean, my reports are probably 20, 25 pages. Yeah, theirs are bound small books.
My next one is going to be the stumper for you, for the record. Why? It's a pet peeve of mine. You're going to see. Yes, you're gonna see I'm gonna play my cards here.
Go for it.
Why does an appraiser need a purchase agreement to appraise a property?
Get this all the time. Honestly, I honestly wish that we didn't, but you'd get even more pissed off if I didn't. So I honestly wish that we didn't get the purchase agreements. It's actually a Fannie Mae regulation. It has nothing to do with me wanting to see it. It's a Fannie Mae regulation, and the reason that it's a Fannie Mae regulation is they want to make sure that, or not make sure, they want me to determine whether or not it's considered an arm's length sale. So maybe I'm buying a property from you, and I'm going to buy the property, but you say, well, hey, I've got this piece of land. So, and I say, oh, well, I want that piece of land. I'll give you this much plus the piece of land. So the lenders want to know, is that money all encompassing of that property or not? Or Darson says, man, I've really got to get this property moved. Here's my boat. No, never happened. No, realtors have gotten smarter. Now they're all on separate addendums that never get seen. Everybody knows that they never get provided to appraisers, even though we all know they exist. But no, it's actually a Fannie Mae regulation because they want to determine if I'm coming in at $300,000 on a property and we agreed at $150,000, well, that's because there's other things changing hands. They want an explanation as to why that difference exists. No different than things like that do happen. Or you sell to a neighbor at a discount or a kid, or so it's an estate. They're motivated. They just want to be done with it. So that's why, as you're trying to determine and help the lender understand the true situation of what's going on with that transaction. But really, I wish I didn't see them.
The off-market deals that appraise at the price that they're both agreed upon by both buyer and seller, right? And then they appraise at the exact price. So my question, again, kind of bear with me.
Oh, it's fine.
When an appraiser comes in right at asking and you're like, I know that I got a discount. I know that I bought that for under what market value is. I've been told there's just no incentive for an appraiser to appraise something above the purchase price. So they typically don't do it. They just make sure they can meet it and call it good.
Literally had one today. It's not yours.
So
I just did one that high today. Sorry, it wasn't one of your deals.
it's irrelevant, really. On the
It
front
really
end.
kind of is irrelevant. And so coming in high, is there benefit to that? No, there's really not, because I have no problem being a little conservative on a report, because I have a lot of liability tied up in that report. I think a lot of people don't understand the requirements, the risks, the liability that appraisers have in reporting what we do. So there's not a whole lot of benefit of coming in high. Coming in low, well, the last 2 years just explains that. But the other thing is off-market. Off-market doesn't also necessarily mean a deal. I've seen off-market deals that sold for more than they should have. So you just have to look at and determine how knowledgeable are your buyer and your seller, because if your seller sold it to you for a deal, well, he probably would have given the same deal that, how motivated was he? I want to get done with it, be done, as opposed to, I know the last 2 years again, just like throw the last 2 years out of your mind because it's just so not normal. There's an incentive to, I want to sell it quick, as opposed to, maybe it has to sit on the market for a couple months. There's hassle involved. So
get your questions ready. I'm going to ask one last one. If, like, as an investor, I would pay, what's an appraisal cost? Like $400, $600, like roughly. To me, that's a really good insurance premium to make sure that the property is going to appraise at the value that I think, right? So is there any advantage to an investor on the front end to hire an appraiser, not through a bank, to make sure that the flip they're going to do is going to appraise? And does anyone do that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have had a couple of people do that. But again, that in 16 years, a couple of people. It's funny that people don't want to spend, which I think is a little bit of money when you're invested, depending on, with investing.
It's insurance policy.
It kind of is. The challenge is one, the quality of work that you're going to do. I tell builders, I often go into other houses. If it's a new builder I'm not familiar with and I don't know the type of work they do, is there another property that is on the market that I can look at to see, especially like if it's a plans and specs, like here's what we're going to build, but right now it's bare dirt. It's really hard to tell what that's going to look like, envision, when you don't know them. I have had a couple of people do that, but really maybe 2 or 3 times ever. The market conditions could also change. There's just so many factors. Depending on how you're financing it, I would encourage you to try to push your lender to have that appraisal based on as repaired value. Like after we're going to do all this stuff, have them look at that number if they can. There are flip programs out there. I get offers, say, hey, come and do these assignments. And I generally don't work for big banks, so I ignore them. But they want 2 values. They want a today value and they want it as is value, what they call it, and then they want an as repaired value. So there are programs out there that do that. People just always want to keep their costs down, and I totally get it. I have properties, so I get it. But if you're a newbie in the market, it's probably not a bad idea, just to make sure you know what you're doing. So Jared asked about if he has an appraisal done, then it's still, right, and here's what it is, and then I come in to do the appraisal for the bank.
You're gonna say,
yes, I'm gonna say great, I don't care. Because I'm signing my name to that report, I'm gonna do my own, not that I won't look at it, I see plenty of reports, and I always am curious to see, like, especially if it's a unique property, I want to see how somebody else approached that. So I will look at it, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do my own research because it's my license on the line. Lenders can't allow, so the process, getting the loan, Fannie Mae dictates so much more than you probably have any clue. Obviously, I think everybody knows now you can't pick your own appraiser. That used to be a thing. Fannie Mae has a process in place. They have a panel of approved appraisers. They have to rotate. They get audited on all this stuff. You can't say, well, I just had one done. Too bad. We have to follow our rules. Like, if you've got an FHA loan, this is just totally off the book, but Fannie Mae dictates. They have the rules. They have the final say-so on if there are things that have to be repaired. I'm just the eyes, and I see what I see, and I report back to them. Certain things I know are absolute musts. I had a deal 2 weeks ago. It was FHA. You have to have access to the attic to make sure that it's not been sealed and full. The whole thing was new, inside, outside, done by Fergus. Whole thing brand spanking new, and there's no attic access. They sealed everything and drywalled it all completely shut. So I went to the lender. I mean, ultimately is the lender's call as to whether or not. I said it's supposed to be access, but there is no access. It's all new, and they're fine with it. So lenders dictate a whole lot more of what we can do, what we can't do, what has to be done. than we do. So much more of the process is really dictated by lenders.
So the question is, what's the difference between a bedroom and a den? And where are you located? Because I know it could be related to different states or counties. Yep, I know. So is it in Omaha?
Depends. Was it above grade or below grade? Was it upstairs or downstairs?
Low rate.
Okay, so then it probably did have an egress window. It did have a closet. So it has to have two methods. The bedroom essentially has to have two methods of egress. So if one in a basement would be the egress window and then the staircase. Closet, minimum ceiling height, we won't get into all of these new federal regulations. He wants to know bedrooms matter on an appraisal. If you've got one bedroom, then yes, it matters. If you've got, again, it comes to the market, what's expected in the market. I rarely make bedroom adjustments. I mean, above grade. I'm talking above grade. Because a lot of times, if there's a difference in bedroom counts, it's actually because the properties are different sizes. One's a little bit bigger. Well, then you're gonna make a size adjustment. So if you make a size adjustment and a bedroom adjustment.
What about square foot? Do appraisers care about square foot? Like price per square foot?
No. Well, so price per square foot is not a recognized valuation model that we can use. The reason that we don't look at it is because you are literally grouping every part of that property and comparing it to one feature. Square footage of it. You're comparing your site size, your garage size. Does it have basement finish? Does it not? Overall quality of improvements. There's so many things you're lumping into one unit of comparison that it's just not fair. I mean, commercial, whole different ball wax. If you're looking at commercial properties, if you're looking at bigger like apartments, bigger apartment complexes, number of bedrooms for that absolutely makes a difference. You're going to get more income if you've got more bedrooms. It's a given. But again, 95% of what I do is just single family residential.
So the question was comparable resources. So you're looking at Zillow, you're looking at Realtor.com, you're looking at Polk County Assessor. Yep. So what options do people have to create their own comparables?
The MLS is the best option, I hate to say, because that's what I use for almost all of my research. And part of the reason is that I can confirm that data. I can go through photos and say, yes, this is accurate. I can call realtors and say, okay, this is what it looks like in the basement. Was that really the case? Was it something different? Your assessor sites, those are really your only other options. If I'm struggling to find sales myself, I jump on assessor sites and do research just like that. Appraisers really don't use Zillow. Just, we say the A in Zillow stands for accuracy because it's garbage. I wish there was a better answer, but yeah, those are really your best bets. Or find a really good realtor friend.
Do appraisers care about short-term rentals?
That's an excellent question because it's coming up more and more often, and you're not going to like my answer. Fannie Mae doesn't allow the use of short-term rental data because it's inconsistent. If you found a local lender, so it would have to be like an on-the-books type loan through a local lender. Most lenders sell all their loans off through a secondary market. The only way you could possibly do that would be to have a local lender that's going to hold it in-house, but you would also have to have a general appraiser do it, not residential, because they would be comparing it to hotel rates. That's what would be comparable. And I know this is like a nationwide thing. I'm on all kinds of appraisal boards, and this gets discussed often. But not that it wouldn't change maybe down the road, but right now it's not something that is allowed to be used.
It's right, but it's funny because the prices go up when people buy them to short-term rent. So like the prices go up on past sales, just not as much as the rental income should justify it, looking at us as investors.
And the other thing to consider, and I think one of the reasons that they're not allowing that short-term rent to be used is city regulations. A lot of cities are we going to regulate? How are we going to regulate? Some cities have cut them off completely. There's just all of that unknown that we're saying, well, now it's worth this much. And then how do you not relate that to every other property that you could make an Airbnb or VRBO or whatever? So then you're looking at, should every property be worth more because it would have that potential? So it's still I don't say an unknown area. It's getting a lot of chatter at multiple levels.
More of a comment of just like, why does the property that you buy that you think you got a really good deal, and you probably really did, because I know what I'm talking about, and it's still appraised at the purchase price. Like,
I can't speak to anybody else's work. I have had plenty of properties that I've come in high, and it's the easy route to go. I mean, it definitely requires additional analysis, market support to get there. I do a lot more analysis, and I have a lot more charts and graphs and things in my reports than honestly anybody else I know, it's so easy to get it from the MLS now to include that. But probably it's just the easy route to go. What I would say is go back to your lender. If you've got sales and say, hey, here's this, like I mentioned earlier, that reconsideration of value, go back and say, hey, this, were they considered? Why didn't they use them? Yeah, you can do that anytime. Yeah, just take it back to the lender and, kind of challenge it. What's that?
No, I already.
So he asked about general radius as far as how far out we can go on properties. And every appraiser's favorite answer to every question is it depends. Fannie Mae used to have guidelines on urban, you should stick within a mile. Suburban was 5 miles, rural were 20 miles. Those went away many years ago, but they're so ingrained in most appraisers' heads that generally, I just did one on the south side this morning. I had to use the entire south side, but the problem was my property was really close to Wakanda Golf Course. So that takes up a ton of land. The airport takes up a ton of land. So if you look at my 1 mile, like at least a third of it was not residential properties because of that other stuff. So you can go out further. It's just a red flag of why are you going out further? I mean, these were kind of, boundaries that were other issues. But yeah, if you've got a unique property, I've gone out 45 and 60 miles on acreages. If I've got a unique property that's, maybe it's only 15 minutes outside the metro. Well, then what's wrong with going 15 minutes outside, the whole metro if you've got a unique property? So there really aren't guidelines anymore, but the appraiser needs to explain if I went 3 miles when there's some right here, why? Okay, so he asked if an appraisal comes in at like a lot lower than the contract price, you're asking for things that they could do immediately to help bump that up. And people never like my answer, so I'm okay with it. But the answer is probably nothing because the property is what it is. There's no magic, if you had done this, it would make a difference. The property is what it is. So, the size, the location, all of the main features, anything that they could do to change the value is going to cost money. So there's not really, again, it's looking at, I rarely ever come in low without reaching out to both agents first. And I ask them, what sales did you use to support this number? Because I'm not perfect. If I missed something, I want to know. And I want to know what numbers, how they got there. One, it puts them on notice that things aren't looking so great. But two, it puts them on a spot that you've got to do your job. We can't just pick numbers out. And again, the last 2 years were terrible for that. But I've had agents come back and be like, yeah, we know it was high. I've had agents come back and be like, yeah, we had to go clear over there. I'm like, well, there's comps, like a whole bunch of them within a half mile. But you can always, if there are better sales that you think exist to support that price, you can always submit those to be reviewed. So here's the thing too, in our market, we're not on one of those big roller coasters. So when we see market changes, they're pretty darn gradual. I mean, other than again winter, things might shut off, but it might be a week. When rates started jumping up, things did shut off, but that was just that uncertainty. No one knew what was going on. So he asked about how distressed properties, maybe termite or other pest damage, estates, things like that. Distressed properties, how is condition evaluated, if I'm understanding correctly. You look at it, if you've ever looked at an appraisal report, especially again single family or small multifamily, the sales comparison grid, there's only one line for condition. Now we can make adjustments calling them the same condition, but it's just reflected in overall condition. Something like a pest infestation, something like that, we would probably make an extraordinary assumption that based on, we're not inspectors. We know a lot about properties and the things that go wrong and this and that with them and how they're built. But I'm not a pest inspector. I'm not an expert in that. So if I see something like that, I'll make an extraordinary assumption and say that if this is truly an issue, then yeah, value could be impacted. It's just reflected in overall condition. Distressed properties can be really tough to value. Sometimes you kind of have to work into them backwards because the last 2 years we haven't seen many distressed properties, and part of that there was a moratorium on foreclosures, which virtually halted the sale of that. They're out there. They just haven't been sold or put on the market yet. Sometimes you have to almost back into it. Like, here's what it could be worth if it were fixed up. How much is it going to cost to fix it up? Back that out. How much profit would a person expect to get out of it? Back that out. And then you've always got an unknown factor of, that there's going to be things you find and discover. So tough properties, you do almost have to back into them. And again, nor the last 2 years in the normal market, you can generally find properties that are maybe equally as rough. And it's a bit of a guessing game because what you might pay for a really tough rundown property might be very different than what you pay, and that doesn't make either of you wrong. It's the same with an appraisal value. My number might be this, somebody else's number might be that. Doesn't mean we're wrong, as long as we both have market data to support it. The thing is if we have market data to support that, our numbers should at least be close. They should be pretty close to each other. But they can be tough, but you still look for comparable sales that are kind of equally similar in condition. Yeah, so this, again, when I say throw out the last 2 years, so he asked about, for anyone that couldn't hear, he asked about if an appraisal comes in low, but there were multiple offers, and again, this happened a lot in the last 2 years. And there was a ton of discussion on appraisal boards about how do you handle that, because it is so much more difficult to appraise in an increasing market because you're always chasing that number than when things are stable or even sliding backwards because it's not a problem. There were so many discussions on, what is the fair market value? If multiple people are willing to pay that amount, then how is that not the fair market value? But when you have to base it on sales, and the lender says, well, you need to base it on sales, and that's what we want, it's a catch-22. Let me tell you, the last 2 years have sucked as an appraiser because I came in low on more appraisals in the last 2.5 years than I probably have in my whole career combined before that. And it's a no-win situation to be in for anybody.
Does the loan product matter on the appraisal? Like your cash versus FHA?
For value, no. No. Requirements, I don't know if FHA has more requirements and things that can't happen in either, but value-wise, no, it doesn't make a difference. So he asked about a 1007, and it's an income. Yeah, I know. We're getting into form types. Great question. You're knowledgeable. So I should say you don't always have, again, that's a lender call. So he's asking, like, if you have a single-family property that's rented, and you're getting charged extra, I'm sure, because they're putting this extra for. It's essentially a more in-depth income analysis. I've done a bunch for smaller banks, and they don't require. They just want to know value based on single family. But if it's going to be anything that goes secondary market, then they would have to do the 1007 on it. But yeah, you're getting charged extra, right, for that? Yeah.
Cool. We're going to wrap this up. Appreciate everyone coming out. Reminder: so next month is February 14th is the second Tuesday, so it's Valentine's Day. And we're going to do a fun one with a couples kind of panel of how we deal with our spouses in real estate. When I say that tongue in cheek, my wife would be fine with that. But we're going to have a couple people up here just talking with husband, wife, and how each kind of handle their experiences in real estate, conversations, and all that good stuff. So please join us next month of February. And then also, those of you that are local and want to join, so we do 7 a.m. every single Friday at Smoky Row on Cottage Grove. And it's just a group, 15 to 25 people. It's in the back room. It's not like this. It's not a presentation style. It's really popcorn questions, one conversation. If you have, hey, I want to know about, I'm thinking about doing this. Should I do it? And you get a group of experienced investors and newbie investors helping kind of walk you through that decision. So kind of that's two group event promotion type stuff. That is, I say promotion, it's really just a bunch of investors talking. So other than that, we'll just network and appreciate y'all coming.